I'm really proud of the work that our government is doing to advance projects that will create real, tangible opportunities here in British Columbia alongside the provincial government and international and Indigenous partners. The agreement announced today will create thousands of good, skilled jobs, open doors to new opportunities for local businesses and supply chains, helping strengthen Canada and British Columbia's role in the global energy economy. It's initiatives like this one that are ensuring our province remains a key player in global energy security at a time where reliable, trusted partners are more important than ever. Because a Team Canada approach is the best approach. And with that, I'll pass it off to Minister Hodgson to make this exciting announcement. Thank you. Merci beaucoup tout le monde.
Thanks, Jake. Thank you very much for being with us here today. Hello, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. Good morning, Minister Dix, President-in-Chief Clayton, and Deputy Counsel Derek Jacobi from Germany. Thank you all for being here to celebrate this day. And leaders from industry and the Indigenous communities, thank you for being here today. Thank you for being here to mark an exciting and important milestone for Canada's energy future. It's been just over a year since I became Minister of Natural Resources, and at that time I started saying Canada has what the world wants. That's because we not only have abundant energy and extraordinary natural resources, but we also have some of the most skilled workforces in the world and one of the most educated populations in the world. We have a reliable democracy. We have impressive Indigenous leadership. And we have access to 3 oceans on which to ship our goods to the world. And increasingly, Canada is something even more valuable than all of these things. We have trust. In a moment that feels uncertain and volatile, the world trusts Canada. You don't have to take it from me. A few weeks ago, the executive director of the International Energy Agency, Fatih Birol, visited Canada, and he said the very same thing. This trust, as Dr. Birol said, gives Canada a golden opportunity. He said, and I quote, "When I look at the world, the energy-hungry world, it needs Canada more than ever." Ladies and gentlemen, the world is indeed an energy-hungry world. As the Prime Minister said when he was here in Vancouver just last week, we are not in normal times. We are in an energy crisis of epic proportions across 3 dimensions: energy availability, energy security, and energy transition. So let me elaborate briefly on all 3. First, many of our allies around the world are facing an urgent challenge with respect to energy availability. While we are fortunate not to be facing anything close to a shortage in Canada, we know that energy markets are global, and this availability challenge shows up in Canada as an affordability challenge. That's why last month we canceled the federal fuel excise tax on gasoline and diesel, because Canadians shouldn't have to pay for a war they didn't start. The second dimension of this energy crisis that the Prime Minister identified is energy security. This dimension is only getting more apparent as the world becomes more dangerous and divided. Global energy markets are highly integrated, and it's getting clearer and clearer that integration is potentially a vulnerability for our allies around the world, especially in Europe and Asia. However, this is a vulnerability Canada can help solve with responsible development and new exports of our energy resources. The third dimension of this energy crisis is the need to address climate change through a successful energy transition, one that has the potential to create good-paying Canadian jobs, to enhance Canada's leadership in areas like nuclear, CCUS, and renewables, and one that makes energy more secure and affordable for all Canadians. And while growing our economy on the way to net zero, and also while growing our economy on the way to net zero by 2050. Anyone who tells us the dimensions of this energy crisis are not daunting is not telling the truth. As we tackle this challenge, the policies we make, the projects we build, and the direction we set today will determine our trajectory for years to come. But with crisis comes opportunity, which brings me back to the urgent need for Canada to not just talk about our resource wealth, but use our energy and natural resources to put the proverbial best cards in our hands and to build Canada strong for all. We must translate advantage into action. We must build projects that strengthen our economy, that diversify our supply chains, and that enhance our energy sovereignty, as well as expand our exports beyond a single market. Building these projects will create good Canadian careers. They will advance Indigenous reconciliation, and they generate the revenue to pay for things we care about as Canadians. Things like healthcare, childcare, public safety, and infrastructure. As Minister of Energy, that's how I measure success. Projects greenlit, partnerships with Indigenous peoples struck, exports sold to new markets, and jobs and prosperity created for Canadians. To that end, I'm extremely pleased to announce that the leading German energy utility, Securing Energy for Europe, or CEFE, has signed a new agreement to buy liquefied natural gas offtake from Ksi Lisims LNG. This marks a major milestone for this project as it advances towards its final investment decision, its construction, and production. Through this agreement, CEFE will purchase 1 million tons per annum of LNG for up to 20 years, beginning in the early 2030s. Less than a year ago, Canada made history as we shipped our first cargo of LNG to global markets. Today, this contract represents the first agreement that we see long-term, low-carbon LNG from Canada being shipped to our allies in Europe. A clear example of how we can not only support global energy security, reduce reliance on coercive actors like Russia, advance Indigenous leadership and equity, but also deliver on our promise to Canadians to diversify and expand our trade. This agreement is a testament that the Prime Minister's trade diversification efforts are working. In fact, this agreement stems from a trade mission our cabinet took to Germany in August of 2025, led by the Prime Minister. On that trip, we committed to exploring further collaboration on energy, including Canada's interest in supplying Germany with liquefied natural gas. We were honored to have President Clayton and representatives from Ksi Lisims with us in Berlin, where they first made contact with CEFE and began discussions that became the agreement Canada and Germany are celebrating today. And since that trade mission, our government has been advancing this project together in partnership with our good partners from the government of British Columbia. Less than 3 weeks after that mission to Berlin, Ksi Lisims project was approved under Canada and BC's One Project, One Review agreement, proving the very point of such agreements when the project was greenlit by British Columbia at 4 p.m. on September 15th, 2025, and by the federal government at 4:30 p.m. the same day. 2 months later, we took the next step by referring Ksi Lisims LNG to the Major Projects Office, along with the 800-kilometer Prince Rupert Gas Transmission Project to supply feed gas for liquefaction, and a 95-kilometer electricity transmission line to supply zero-carbon clean electricity to the facility for liquefaction. This referral was made for several reasons, all of which demonstrate this project's significant nation-building potential. First, Ksi Lisims LNG, together with the Niska Nation, Western LNG, and Rockies LNG, in a partnership that places Indigenous ownership and leadership at the center of development. I've been enormously privileged to get to know President Clayton in her capacity leading this project over the last year. And I can say from experience that her approach not only strengthens the Nisga'a Nation, but this province and this country as a whole. Thank you. It serves as an example of how governments and Indigenous partners can and should work together as equals, guided by Indigenous knowledge and leadership, to build big things in a responsible way. Second, we referred the Ksi Lisims project to the MPO for its transformative economic potential. Once built, it will become Canada's second largest LNG facility, attracting nearly $30 billion in private sector investment and creating thousands of skilled careers for Canadians. By fundamentally changing Canada's role as a global LNG supplier, Ksi Lisims will generate significant economic activity in British Columbia and beyond. It will contribute more than $15 billion in GDP to the Canadian economy over the coming 30 years. Thirdly, Ksi Lisims represents an extraordinary example of responsible, sustainable, low-carbon resource development. It has been designed to be connected to British Columbia's world-leading clean electricity grid, meaning it has the potential to be a net zero emissions facility. By using clean hydropower for the liquefaction process, the facility also is expected to operate at an emissions intensity approximately 94% below the current global average once fully electrified. Let me repeat that, 94% below the global average. That is important not only for Canada's mission to fight climate change, but our global push to reduce emissions. Because low carbon intensity Canadian LNG displacing higher emitting energy sources around the world, like coal, will avoid global emissions while helping our allies strengthen their energy security amidst the energy crisis I mentioned at the start of this speech. This is particularly important for Canada's allies in Europe, including Germany, who continue to diversify their energy supplies and seek stable, democratic partners following the world's last big energy rupture, when Russia illegally invaded Ukraine and began to use natural gas supplies to our European allies as a weapon of war. In sum, our government looks at this project and sees Indigenous leadership, economic growth and investment, low carbon development, and the opportunity for Canada to help with international energy security. At the same time, and because all of those factors makes projects like this so important, building at this scale requires coordination and a clear path forward. Your federal government is committed to that path forward and making sure Canada can move major projects forward both quickly and responsibly, working hand in hand with provinces, Indigenous partners, and industry. That's exactly what the Major Projects Office is doing, and why I'm confident that Ksi Lisims LNG will reach final investment decision in a matter of months, begin construction shortly thereafter, and start exporting to our friends and partners in Germany and beyond by the early 2030s. Before I conclude, I want to note that while I'm pleased to celebrate the deal with Ksi Lisims LNG and CFE today, what we're seeing in British Columbia is also bigger than just one project or one deal. This province is at the forefront of Canada becoming a clean and conventional energy superpower. It is also becoming a global example of a new model for energy development, one that prioritizes Indigenous partnership and cleaner growth. In fact, BC is building from scratch one of the largest, cleanest, and most inclusive LNG industries in the world. An industry that will create prosperity and revenues to pay for the service that British Columbians and Canadians, including Indigenous peoples, rightly expect from their governments. It started with LNG Canada Phase 1. And 2 weeks ago, we took a major step closer towards a final investment decision on LNG Canada Phase 2. Today's announcement is setting up Ksi Lisims LNG for a final investment decision in the coming months. And it's just the beginning of the story. We also have 2 additional projects under construction. Wood Fibre LNG, set to come online in early 2027, and Cedar LNG, expected to begin operations in 2028. Notably, Wood Fibre LNG is breaking new ground as the first industrial project in Canada to recognize a non-treaty Indigenous government, the Squamish Nation, as a full environmental regulator, setting a powerful precedent for what environmental stewardship and industrial growth can look like. Moreover, Cedar LNG, led by the Haisla Nation, will be the world's first Indigenous, majority-owned LNG export facility powered by clean electricity. Ladies and gentlemen, it's clear, Canada and British Columbia are open for business. And ladies and gentlemen, the rest of the world is noticing. At the end of last month, Shell's CEO, Wael Sawan, said his confidence in Canada as a place to build and invest has grown significantly over the last year. This confidence goes beyond any one project. We are seeing unprecedented confidence in Canada as a place to invest. Confidence in our new approach and the fact that Team Canada is truly moving faster and building bigger while protecting our environment and advancing Indigenous leadership and equity. It's a busy port. We're not just going on trade missions. We're coming back with deals like the one we're announcing today. We're not just talking about the golden opportunity Dr. Birrell mentioned. We are seizing it. And we're not just ready to build, we are building. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. I'll now pass the mic over to my good friend and colleague, Minister Adrian Dix.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's wonderful to be here today on the territories of the Musqueam, of the Squamish, of the Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. It's an honor to be here with Minister Hodgson. We're going to get you a special pass for all your trips to British Columbia. Be here with MP Sawatsky. I want to say as well my appreciation and respect for President Eva Clayton of the Ksi Lisims government and the role that that government has played in treaty making, of course, foundationally, but also for children and families, for healthcare, for education, for economic development, for forestry, for taking care of the land, for the environment, and now breaking new ground in this area. I am honored always to share the stage with President Clayton, always to share the stage with people from the Ksi Lisims government. I want to welcome Deputy Consul General Jacoby as well here, and our offices are right next door, so it's pretty good. This is an important announcement today. It reflects what's going on in British Columbia, which is substantive projects, projects with proponents and plans and agreements and environmental approvals and led by First Nations that are, I think, not just in many ways unique in North America, weak in Canada, and unique in North America, but unique in the world. We currently have 35 projects of a value of $88 billion. Wait, that was 2 weeks ago. The number is now more than $100 billion. We announced more clean energy projects and the progress that Minister Hodgson has indicated with respect to LNG Canada 2. The Ksi Lisims project is a demonstration of how we are doing business in BC, addressing issues fundamentally while maintaining the highest standards. The Nisga'a insist on it, we insist on it. On June 4th, 2025, the substantial start decision was made by the BC Environmental Assessment Office. That was a key decision. On September the 15th, as Minister Hodgson has suggested, we gave environmental assessment approval to the Ksi Lisims office, and because of our one review, one project approach that we've done together, the federal government joined us that day. That time, on that project, the work was done by the province of BC with the support of the federal government, but that's taking care of what needs to be taken care of. On November the 4th, the BC Energy Regulator gave the facility permit for Ksi Lisims. On November 21st, we passed legislation that made it easier for large potential projects to hook on the BC energy grid and advance the North Coast transmission line by passing legislation. On January 20th, 2026, we signed a deal with Ksi Lisims and with the Ksi Lisims government, an electricity agreement between BC Hydro and them that will ensure that the 600 megawatts are there and outline when they'll be there and how they'll be there. This is how you address issues, and the major permitting questions have been resolved on this project. It's the work that we're doing together. And why are we doing it? Because this is tens of billions of dollars of investment, thousands of good paying jobs, agreements and projects led by Indigenous governments that are setting an example for the country and for the world. Prosperity for communities, for Canada and for British Columbia. And yes, the lowest emission LNG in the world. This is a significant project that will contribute now and in the future to regional, provincial, and national prosperity. It's a substantial project. It's a real project. Je dirais quand on parle des dizaines de milliards d'investissements en Colombie-Britannique, quand on parle des milliers d'emplois bon payants, quand on parle des partenariats entre les Premières Nations et le gouvernement et les entreprises, quand on parle de la prospérité pour les communautés un peu partout dans la province et dans le pays, quand on parle du changement, on reçoit un éclat. Quand on parle de changement comme cela, un projet comme cela, nous sommes fiers de le soutenir. So I wanted to say finally that this is an important moment. This is the third offtake agreement, but the first with Europe. And the work that has been done between Germany and Canada has been significant in this regard, and Minister Hodgson has described this. We are dealing with the challenges from the United States and the challenges in the world by growing, by building, by diversifying, and by being what we are and will continue to be, leaders in climate action. I'm proud of this joint effort that involves business, the community, the federal and provincial governments, and of course the Ksi Lisims government. I am proud of the work being done at Ksi Lisims. We have more work to do. It is, as you've seen, progress after project, action after action. That needs to continue. It is important that this is a major project, but you show that through action. That's what we've been doing, and that's what we have to continue to do. So congratulations to everyone involved, and thank you very much for having me today. And I'm going to now introduce, I've done it a little bit already, President Eva Clayton of the Ksi Lisims government.
Before I begin, I want to acknowledge the land acknowledgement, Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh. Thank you to our treaty partners, represented by Minister Hodgson, Minister Dix, and welcome to the Deputy Consulate for Germany. Thank you to the two ministers for helping us, Ksi Lisims. I especially want to thank Minister Hodgson for introducing us the agreement to Germany's CFE, introducing CFE to the Canadians. Thank you for that. Today marks a very important milestone, not just for Ksi Lisims LNG, but for the Niska Nation, for Canada, and for our partners abroad. It signals something very clear. In this time of global instability, the world is looking to Canada for reliable, responsible energy solutions. For the Niska Nation, Ksi Lisims LNG has always been about developing our projects in a way that is compatible with our climate goals and our environmental stewardship responsibilities. I am pleased to see that our low carbon LNG, made in part thanks to the world's leading sustainability practices employed by Canadian producers, is gaining attention as far as Germany. Very few projects in the world have a clear path to net zero emissions. And they're all in BC. I would like to thank Minister Dix and the province of British Columbia for continuing to shepherd Ksi Lisims LNG through the provincial system. Thank you. British Columbia has the highest expectations for how projects must be developed, and we have risen to that challenge and set a new benchmark in a large-scale and low-carbon LNG. This would not be possible without the tireless work by the Premier, the Minister, and BC Hydro to continue to advance industrial-scale electrification and transmission system investments. Ksi Lisims LNG represents a unique path, one where Niska are not just participants in development, but leaders and decision makers. This agreement is a win-win agreement. First, it advances an Indigenous co-developed project that shows the world how major energy infrastructure can be built responsibly with strong environmental stewardship and meaningful Indigenous leadership. Second, it supports Canada's ambition to become a global energy superpower. Projects like Ksi Lisims LNG strengthen our economy, create jobs, and diversify our exports. And third, from Berlin to Beijing, the world needs more of what Canada has. Stable, secure energy in an increasingly uncertain world. Our buyers do not have to choose between energy security and climate responsibility. Ksi Lisims LNG is designed to deliver both. For the Niska Nation, this project is about building a stronger future for our people, one that honors our land, supports our communities, and creates real lasting opportunity. Opportunity for our nation, for all nations along the pipeline route, and for the communities, especially in northern BC, looking to create stable careers and economic development. And for Canada, it shows what is possible when Indigenous nations are true partners in nation building. There is still work ahead as we move to finalize the remaining agreements. But today is a very important step forward, a step toward a stronger, more resilient Canadian economy, and a step toward supporting our partners around the world. Thank you. I will now turn it over to Charlotte.
Thank you very much, President Clayton. Okay, we will now begin the media Q&A. I would invite any reporters who are here in person to line up on the left side of the stage here by the mic. And we would ask that each reporter ask one question and one follow-up. Please state your name and outlet at the start of your question, as well as the speaker to which your question is addressed to. We'll start with questions in person, and then we'll turn it over to any reporters on the line. Thank you. Merci. First question.
Good morning, Thomas Steele from Bloomberg News. My question is for the Federal Energy Minister. You spoke about the potential for displacement of higher carbon fuels with projects like Ksi Lisims and other BC LNG projects. At the moment, we're seeing particularly AI suck up every spare gas molecule and electron it can find. So what's your confidence that this new supply is displacing and not just additive?
So, as our Prime Minister said, we need to engage in the world as it is, not as we wish it to be. The AI revolution is a real revolution. It is a new revolution. It is dramatically increasing the demand for power on top of already a need to electrify our economies to reduce carbon footprints. So the reality is every country is looking at significantly increased demand for electricity. In our country, we've said we need to double our grid and double our capacity by 2050. We're seeing the same things around the world. Maybe I'll put it into perspective. When we were in Germany last August and we met with all of the major German electricity providers, they said the same thing. It was uniform. In the world that exists today, in a world where we have disruption of our supply, where we have hegemons using energy for coercion, we need to look at how we get to net zero. In a world where AI is coming on us that we didn't anticipate, we need to look at how we get to net zero. And what they all said uniformly is they see LNG as an important transition fuel. And what they said to us is what we now know, given the way the world is, not the way we wish it to be, we are going to need more of that transition fuel, and we are going to need it for longer. And if that is the reality, what the Germans told us is we are looking for alternatives. We are looking for diversity of supply, and we see what you're doing. We see you're producing the lowest carbon intensity LNG in the world. We see you're doing it in partnership with your indigenous peoples. We have a shared view around energy will not be used for coercion, and we want to trade with you. Can we please trade with you? That is a conversation that has happened over and over again as we've gone around the world. So I am very confident that as the world uses more and more electricity, and they look for baseload supplies, the cleanest potential baseload supply that's the best transition fuel is LNG. We have what they want. Canadians expect us to produce it in a responsible way. They expect us to use it to pay for things like health care and dental care and child care, and that's what we're doing.
Thank you. My second question is also for you, Minister, which is regarding Stephen Guilbeault is expected to resign today. He's criticised the sort of shift towards conventional energy policy. There's also been reports of this letter from Liberal MPs concerned about this shift in policy. The Prime Minister's response, I think, was there's 160 other Liberal MPs, but 160 is not a majority. So are you confident that you can keep this direction going with the existing Liberal caucus?
So first of all, I want to thank Mr. Guilbeault for his service. It's a big decision to serve your country and your constituents, and he did it very well for many years. I also want to recognize his passion. He's been a passionate advocate for the environment. He's been a passionate advocate for nature. He's been a passionate advocate for Canadian identity, and he's done a very good job of that. We all share a view that we want to get to net zero by 2050. In our caucus, we have robust discussions around how we do that. We take everyone's view. The collective view is the way we're going to get there is not by telling people what they can't do, but by building in a more responsible way. That was part of the climate competitiveness strategy that the Minister of Environment, Julie DeBruzen, put out. Excellent piece of work. It's also the reason why the chair of our climate caucus, our co-chair, Eric St-Pierre, said we're on the right path. So, you know, we're a big tent party. We have people who share their views. At the end of the day, we come together, we form a collective view, and then we execute on that.
Thank you, Thomas. All right, next question.
Lindsay Duncombe, CBC National News. I'd like to direct this to the Energy Minister, please, the Federal Energy Minister. Mr. Hodgson, in order for this project to go ahead, there needs to be a large pipeline built. We know that there is opposition to the Prince Rupert project to move the gas to this project. And the last time that happened, going to LNG Canada, there was significant conflict in this province that also resonated right across the country. In the face of challenges and opposition, what is your plan to deal with the concerns of neighboring nations and Canadians that don't want to see this go?
So I don't think this is uniformly a question for the federal government. This is a question for the BC government. This is a question for the proponents for the pipeline. Look, a lot has changed in the last 10 years. A lot has changed. We're in a rupture. We're in a world where energy security is national security. We're in a world where our allies are begging us to produce our resources. We're in a world where if we want to pay for our health care, if we want to pay for our dental care, if we want to pay for our child care, we need to find sources of revenue. We've now found a collective shared view about how we do this. As the Prime Minister said, we're not going to talk about if, we're going to talk about how. And the how is we're going to do it in an environmentally responsible way in partnership with Indigenous peoples. And with respect to this pipeline, it has gone through the approval process. There has been significant consultation. There's been accommodation. I should really let Minister Dix talk about this. We think we're doing the right thing. This is what Canadians want us to do. So I think looking at what happened 10 years ago ignores a lot that's happened in the last 10 years. Do you want to add to that?
Just to say that in Canada and BC, we have some of the strongest environmental laws in the world. And the environmental assessment process, if you talk to anyone working at Ksi Lisims, you will know that it's an extensive and detailed and more detailed process, that there is wide consultation and participation in that process in terms of environmental assessment, whether it be for Ksi Lisims or for the Prince Rupert gas transmission line. So we have to continue to engage with nations to make sure that we drive the maximum possible consensus on these questions. As well, we do have to change the way we do business, and it is succeeding here. I just want to highlight on LNG projects just how it's succeeding. At Tilbury, there's an agreement between Fortis and the Musqueam that involves ownership. At Woodfibre LNG, there's an agreement on environmental assessment, including environmental assessment by the Squamish Nation. Right now, it will be, when it opens in 2027, the lowest emission LNG in the world, and massive and significant participation there. LNG Canada had its own work and own relationships that continue, including with the Haisla Nation. The Haisla Nation is the leader of the Cedar LNG project in partnership with Pembina. Significant change. And again, with respect to Ksi Lisims, led by the Nisga'a Nation. This makes a significant difference. Not to say that ownership or equity deals with all issues, but this is a dramatic and profound change in the way we're doing business, just as when we're making the biggest build out of clean energy in BC. which is remarkable. You saw the announcements last week, the equivalent of 850,000 homes in wind projects with 50% equity ownership for First Nations. It doesn't mean that all neighboring nations are in agreement with that. In fact, we know it doesn't mean that in each case. But this is, I think, here in British Columbia and in Canada, the Prime Minister and the Premier are leading on economic development, not in opposition groups, but with people. And that's why we're succeeding. That's why we're leading the country in major projects. That's why we're succeeding and we're going to lead Canada throughout this period where economic growth is required in our province, in our country where we need to build. It'll be British Columbia that leads that because we're doing all of those things, and we have to continue to do them.
I'd like to address my follow-up to President Clayton. President Clayton, when I was in the area last year, I talked to some folks in neighboring communities, and one of their concerns was that the partner in this is a big American company based in Houston, and they were worried that a large share of the profits from this big Canadian project were going to go to American shareholders. How do you address those concerns?
Thank you for the question. We've been addressing it through our project team. We continue to work together with the people. The Nisga'a Nation came out of the gate in recognition of the changing times in the world. The Nisga'a Nation didn't stop at entering into partnerships with just Canadians, but we sought world-leading businesses that will assist with the project, and that will assist in bringing Canada together. One of the biggest things that the nation did coming out of the gate with the pipeline, we did the consultations with all of the Indigenous groups along the pipeline. Granted, there will be there's a whole mixture of thoughts there, but more and more of our Indigenous people are beginning to recognize the very trying times that the world is facing, and so they're looking at ways to bring prosperity to their people, because when you think about it, many of us, the Indigenous groups, were managing poverty. We now want to manage prosperity. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next question.
Hi, Jared Yeager here with Sitka Media. This question is for Minister Hodgson. So if you look on a map, BC is three oceans and a sea away from Germany. You know, a lot of people might think, why not just pipe it across the country and then just ship it over the Atlantic? For those who might not understand, why ship it directly from BC?
So, without wonking out on economics, it's much cheaper to move LNG over water in a tanker than it is to pay tolls to ship it all across a country. And it's all about economics. So when Germany looked at where it can find sources of LNG, it looked at the relative economics and saw British Columbia as an attractive place for them to have new sources of LNG. But the other thing that's also really important, and it's why Canada is meeting the moment for our allies, is our allies found themselves in a really challenging spot. In the case of a country like Germany that got the vast majority of its natural gas from Russia before the Ukraine war, they saw the risk of their factories shutting down. They saw the risk of kids not being able to go to school because the schools weren't going to be heated. They needed diversity of supply. The next place they turned was the Middle East. Almost all of the LNG that's produced in the Middle East comes through the Straits of Hormuz. That's no longer a reliable source. So if you're one of our allies, like Asia, like Europe, and you see your traditional sources of supply now become questionable sources of supply, you look for where do I diversify, and as I said, they look at Canada and say, wow, you produce the most responsible product in the world, you produce it in partnership with First Nations, you produce it at an effective cost that's interesting, we really want to do business with you. So hopefully that, it's both price, but it's also we are a reliable partner in a world where reliable partners are increasingly hard to find.
And on that note, so you said it's nothing's going to happen until the early 2030s. That's lots of time for things to stabilize, both in Eastern Europe and in the Middle East. If that does happen, is there any risk that this deal falls apart?
It's a long-term contract, so it's a commitment for a 20-plus year. Typically, you build LNG with long-term contracts in place. So once the contract is signed, there's a commitment to fill it.
Hi, Nelson Bennett with Business in Vancouver and ResourceWorks. Just wondering if someone can explain how the LNG will actually get to Europe. Will it be physically, i.e. shipped through the Panama Canal, or would it be some sort of substitution, some sort of swap, a combination of both? And is there a premium attached to that?
So the way these contracts, and I'm now wonking out and getting into management's territory, but typically these contracts are called FOB port, or free on board port, which means the buyer takes control of the LNG when it leaves the dock. The buyer then has the ability to send that cargo anywhere they want in the world. In the case of CEFI, I think it's important to note this is one of the largest buyers of natural gas in Europe. They're a very sophisticated buyer. They can choose to have that cargo flow. If it's on a smaller ship, it could flow through the Panama Canal. If it's a larger ship, it could go around South America, or it could go around Africa, or they could do what's called a swap. And this is quite a common transaction, and without wonking out too much, think about there is a buyer of LNG in Japan, and there's the German buyer who's buying from Ksi Lisims. Let's say that Japanese buyer had a cargo that was going to flow through the Middle East. They could choose to swap cargoes and say, hey, why don't you send your cargo from British Columbia to Japan, a lot shorter and cheaper, and I'll send my cargo that was leaving from the Middle East, I won't send it to Japan, I'll send it to Europe, which is shorter for you. It's a win-win. That's a common practice in global energy markets. It's called a swap. And we see some producers do that all the time. And so that makes production off of BC even more valuable, because it's not just valuable for people buying in Asia, but it makes it more and more attractive to people in Europe.
Thanks, Nelson. We have time for one more question.
Hi, Minister. Chuck Shane with the Canadian Press. I was hoping if you can touch Minister Hodgson, I was wondering if you can touch a little bit about LNG Canada has had some issues with excessive flaring since its operations. I was wondering, are there any lessons learned from that for Ksi Lisims, and whether that changes the scope or how you go about the project going ahead? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, and appreciate the question. And I'm answering because, to a large extent, the regulation and the requirements come under LNG Canada's environmental assessment certificate. So they have conditions and requirements, and regulated by the BC energy regulators. So that's what I'd say. Flaring is, of course, typical when LNG operations start, and they're expected to be reduced over time. We have a level of public information that is, I think, second to none. So the circumstances, the air quality in the region around Kitimat is publicly disclosed on a regular basis, multi-daily basis. To date, it is not the case that people's health is in jeopardy, but it's not desirable. And certainly LNG Canada has received some action from the BC Energy Regulator to address some of these questions, ensuring that that information is available, particularly in circumstances where black smoke appears. So these are concerns with projects in their initial stages. They are regulated for this, and if you heard Mr. Cooper from LNG Canada last week when he was with myself and the Premier, Minister Hodgson, you'll hear how seriously they've taken it and the action that they're taking on it, and that action is expected under their environmental assessment certificate.
Thank you very much. All right, that concludes our media availability. Thank you everyone for coming out today. I'd welcome all the speakers to just stand by the flags. I believe